Thank you so much, Neil, and good morning to everyone. So my name is Lucia, and I'm joining you from New York. I'm here on behalf of the United Nations Office of Partnerships, and it is my pleasure to be joining Jackie and Cyril for a conversation about the impact of the fashion industry on the Sustainable Development Goals. We will also talk about how we can achieve the required impact and scale through collaboration and sector-focused initiatives, such as the Conscious Fashion and Lifestyle Network. Many thanks to massive Frankfurt teams, both at headquarters in Frankfurt and in South Africa, for organizing this event, and many special thanks to Conscious Fashion Impact Fund for their collaboration and support. So let me start with a quick refresher course on Sustainable Development Goals. So these goals are the blueprint for more just, profitable, equal, and sustainable future for all, for the planet and for the people. The goals were adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015 to ensure that we all have a planet worth living on, us and the future generations to come. These 17 goals, they represent the most pressing challenges of our time, from climate to biodiversity, to poverty, inequality, and responsible production and consumption patterns, all relevant to the sector. The goals, they're designed by the UN member states in consultation with the leaders within the fashion industry, within the private sector, within the philanthropic sector, within civil society organizations, to ensure that we get the global buy-in and an engagement from all relevant stakeholders. So for the next 45 minutes to an hour, we will speak with Cyril and Jackie about how the fashion industry has impact on the Sustainable Development Goals and what can we all do individually and collectively to really achieve desired impact. So Jackie and Cyril, great to meet you, great to see you. Where are you right now? Are you based in South Africa?
Cyril?
Yes. So hi, Lucy, good to meet you. And I'm based in Cape Town in South Africa, beautiful city of Cape Town.
What about you, Jackie? Are you?
I'm also in Cape Town, and I've been living here for about 6 years now. And I don't think you'll be able to get me away from my city now.
Yeah, fully understood. So let me start with a little note here. We have less than 2 weeks until the COP26 conference in Glasgow, right? And the message coming from international community is very clear. The time for action is now, and everyone has a role to play. And that's why we are here with you, to really figure out, like, what is your experience? What are your views? What do you do on sustainability? And what do you think the others should do? What is the, what is it that we can do collectively? So Jackie, you are a founder of Twig, a media event projects platform. So what is it? What do you do? And why Twig? What does the Twig mean?
So Twig is an ancient or a misspelling of twig, T-W-I-G, but we spell it T-W-Y-G, indicating something fresh, something new, something green. I didn't want to use eco or green in the name. I just thought something a little bit different. And it means, and we're looking for a new path. We're looking for a fresh take on industry, on life, on lifestyle, which is obviously framed around SDGs, planetary boundaries, a just transition, equality, dignity, and things that are very dear to the South African Constitution and to what you're doing at the UN SDGs. I think we feel very passionate about promoting all of this work and ensuring that people realize the urgency that we have to, that there is in achieving all of this stuff.
So thank you so much. This is a great beginning for the conversation, and like really digging down into whatever you have accomplished so far. But from my perspective, when I hear twig, I see something ever growing, right? Something that is really regenerating and never stops growing. That's my perception of that. And I have seen your website. You have the SDG symbol, the wheel, right? As we call. You have it integrated all through your website. So I'm really, I just want to praise you for really helping us promote the Sustainable Development Goals and demonstrate how it relates to your platform and your portfolio. Now to Cyril. Cyril, you have an impressive role, Chief Executive of Imprint Luxury, right? So what is it? What does the company do? And also, can you tell us like a background, the genesis of your logo? It's a very unique logo, and what does it stand for?
Thanks, Lucy, for that. So Imprint is actually a family business, and we're involved in marketing, PR, and events. And the logo is actually the concentric circles, which talk about life from a tree. And because it's a family business and we have different generations in our company, we thought that was the perfect logo because we have generation X, Y, and Z in our company. And it really sort of was the best symbol for who we are and what we stand for.
Thank you, Cyril. The reason why I was leaning back and forth from the screen is I was looking for the Sustainable Development Goals wheel logo. I couldn't find it. Maybe later through our conversation we can pull it in and kind of demonstrate how your work and the fashion industry work really relates to the specific goals within the SDG wheel, the palette of the SDG wheel. So now let's jump into the specific questions, right? So I have questions that are both for you and Jackie to answer, and then I would like to later on in our conversation kind of drill down and focus on specifics of your work and Jackie's work. So there'll be questions just specifically addressed to you, Cyril, and then to Jackie. So let's start with these warm-up questions for both of you. So today's reality as we stand, both in New York and in Cape Town, our realities are vastly different from where we have been a year and a half or 2 years ago, right? Before the COVID-19 explosion. So the fashion industry, we have seen this unparalleled disruption to its operation and supply chains. So can you tell us, from your perspective, what has the pandemic, what has it meant to your specific business, and how does it impacting your community? Let me start perhaps with you, Cyril.
Sure. So I think, the pandemic, not only globally, but locally here in South Africa has had adverse reaction on many businesses. We've seen a lot of businesses close, and we've seen that people have literally gone through really testing times. And I think to pivot to the positive side of it, I think what's been interesting to see is that people had to look at supporting local businesses, local industries. And I think, that's really where I kind of want to focus on, because the work that we do in our company, the work that we do at Fashion Revolution, the work that we do through Plain Tiger is all about supporting local and getting stuff done properly, so it comes back to quick responses. So I think in terms of fast fashion, we were so busy, we were all kind of on this massive treadmill going somewhere. I don't know where we were all going. And the pandemic happened and we literally were stopped in our tracks. And we had to think about how would we do this better. And, I think the pandemic has given the earth a literal sort of pause button to pause, to think about our better ways forward. And in your introduction, I kind of liked how you introduced the SDGs, and it's about doing things the right way for people and for planet. And I think literally the pandemic, that's what it's done. It's caused us to stop and think, how are we doing things? Are we doing things the right way? Are we doing it good for people and good for the planet? And that's really the biggest sort of thing I think that the pandemic has brought to us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would just add to this, for the planet, people, and community, because I think that's the dimension that has kind of been emphasized and brought to the surface throughout the pandemic, that we suddenly were left isolated, right? We have to, people were on lockdown, and we had to rely on our family and the closest community, both on a continuation of our lives as we know it, and our businesses, right? Suddenly the ties within the communities became so much more prominent and important. Before, I feel that we have always looked at, the bigger global horizons, and suddenly our universe, our work of operations shrunk to our closest community, and we really have to think, what is the important thing that we are doing for our community? How can we rely on the community? What is the impact on the place, on those that we rely on? And it could be like a family, it can be on from safety and security perspective, like the people around us, and of course it relies also to our business community. So with that, I would like to ask Jackie the same question. How has the whole COVID-19 experience impacted you? What has been the lessons learned? And where are you now? How do you look at it from today's perspective?
So there are two answers to that question, really. I think for Twig, just being in lockdown and being at home and having so many hours available to work, a lot of interesting developments have happened for Twig itself, developing relationships with people. So for Twig, it was a fairly good time, and it has been a good time. But what has been incredibly interesting from a community perspective and from a personal perspective is I got involved with the community action networks, which is something that has started in Cape Town, where grassroots communities partnered with basically the rich suburbs, partnered with poor township communities to aid them. So we had these community connections which we didn't have before, and they became incredibly powerful, not only in supporting people who had no money, no food, no masks, and then with people who had the resources to provide, there was this, and the very quick response time. So for instance, I would get a call from somebody saying, we really, really need, we've got a whole lot of elderly people in this very poor community that don't have any masks. Then Twig started a drive where we got money donated, and with that money we got tailors to make masks, community-based tailors to make masks, to be able to distribute those masks to people who couldn't afford to buy their own masks. But this became quite a very, very interesting network of help across communities in Cape Town. And what has been absolutely fascinating by that is also the level of breaking down borders and boundaries that have existed for so many decades and centuries in this country, that I have found that a very rich experience from my perspective as a white South African middle-aged woman. And I think a lot of people have had that similar experience, because it wasn't just one experience of going to help on Madiba Day. It's a constant, it's been constant community action that these networks have developed. And I think it's been a very, very powerful partnerships that have developed between communities in South Africa. So Twig could help, because we do a lot of textile work, we could, and we have contacts with tailors. That's what we supported communities with, is with the drive for masks, reusable masks.
Yeah, these are, this is a story that I have heard in various settings, right? So I think that the pandemic, the hardship brought to the surface the resilience and power of really creativity, and how do you break silos and the status quo. I really have to think very differently to get from one point to the second point, which is the survivor, the sustainability of the community, and thank you for sharing that. It's a great lesson that demonstrates the resilience and really how things can how this negative impact can shape things up in a positive way. Well, let's go to the second question. We will go back to Cyril on kind of the vision of the role of the fashion industry and the sustainability, as we have highlighted a little bit in the intro. So, as we all know, the fashion industry is evolving very fast. It's revising and adapting its priorities constantly. And from your perspective, Cyril, what do you think the fashion industry can do and should do to really advance the sustainability and the wider sustainable development goals? And what is the role of partnerships? How do you perceive partnerships in this equation?
For sure. Lucy, I think I just want to go back a little bit to your comment on communities. And I think, there's a beautiful African proverb which says, and you probably know this one, that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that's really kind of summarizes the importance of partnerships. And recently, I came across a local designer in South Africa that sort of was in a discussion that said to me that she was having a problem with local production, with her production. And she was frustrated and she felt that she was going to take a production outside of South Africa. And I kind of asked her, just give me 24 hours, let me see if I can call on the network, let me see what we can do. Because I felt a responsibility, firstly, just as a fellow human being and wanting to keep production in our country, but also with my role in Fashion Revolution, I felt that we needed to do something. And so what I did was I called a large retailer in South Africa, TFG, had a chat to them, to Graham Choi specifically, who heads up local manufacturing for TFG. And we had a discussion and I explained what the local designer was facing, the challenges that she was facing. And he said to me, he would open up a portion of the factory to assist this designer with her production. And this was monumental because this is the role that partnerships have, specifically when it comes to sustainability, because what that meant was production was kept in South Africa. It meant that jobs were created for the local team at the factory. And also it assisted the local designer in the fact that she didn't need to travel far. She didn't need to get out of Cape Town. The production was done right here within local distance. And I think partnerships are the bedrock of what we do, and I think when it comes to Fashion Revolution, when it comes to any business, we really rely on our partnerships. And I think when it comes to local designers and their production, when it comes to any creative artisan, we really want to keep things local as possible, and we want to celebrate what we can do in our country. So I think partnerships are huge.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I absolutely agree with that. That's even in New York, such a diverse, city linked to the global supply chain. I have seen so much focus now on doing things locally, really connecting with local communities and trying to explore how all these entities and initiatives link to what's happening here in the city. And I'm just glad to see that that this is happening. This kind of behavioral pattern has been happening all across, including in your community in South Africa. So now, Jackie, what about you? I already mentioned how much I appreciate your integration of the goals, at least visually, and also in the text, in the messaging, right? Helping us tell the story of the SDGs through your work. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how do you see the partnerships fitting into the fashion industry's role to advancing the goals?
So yeah, I kind of use the SDG 12. I mean, I think all of them are very important, especially in South Africa. There's so many of those goals we have to urgently meet. But the SDG 17 is so important to the work we do. And I think, as exactly what Cyril said, at Twig, we get a lot of calls asking for help to try and connect and create an ecosystem of suppliers and designers. You know, somebody wants you know, where can we get this fabric, or what can I do with this waste? So in a way, I'm kind of connecting people to each other and creating symbiotic relationships, or trying to facilitate that. In some ways, that is what I think our role at Twig is. But you know, on a bigger, that's on a smaller scale, but on a bigger scale, we couldn't survive without partnerships with, for instance, Fashion Revolution, my relationship with Cyril, and other organizations like the British Council, the French Institute. We have relationships with a lot of organizations that help us do the work that we need to do or feel very passionate about doing. So very important to the work that we do. And I think that's just an example of one organization that leads and relies on relationships. But I think so many of the work of people doing the work that we want to get done depend on working together to get to our goal as fast as we can, because we have to be on this journey very quickly. At a high pace, let's say that. We're on this journey going on it as fast as we can, because we need to.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me stay with you, Jackie. You are fluent in the goals, right? And we have about 8 years to go. There is a deadline on the goals. We have committed, and we have made a collective commitment to achieve them by 2030. And now there is some progress on the goals achieved, but on some of the goals, we are actually further. We are further than we were when the goals were negotiated in 2015. Some of it is an impact of the pandemic, and other factors play the role. But from your perspective, within your fashion community, your fashion network, is there better awareness? Do people understand why the goals matter? Do they know who they are, what they are, how to engage? Is there increased awareness of and kind of buy-in into responsibility, why we need to all contribute and really think carefully about SDGs?
Mm-hmm. I don't think so. It's a good question. I think that, in fact, I'm just on my screen here, I've just pulled up a story that I'm preparing to publish. I've got, how do the SDGs relate to South Africa particularly, and then how do they relate to fashion? So I'm trying to it's quite difficult, but firstly to relate them to South African issues, each one of them, by pointing out like employment, poverty, and then getting all the local stats on those, and then how does that then relate to the South African fashion industry? But to answer your question, I think there is not enough awareness about the SDGs in South Africa, and also not enough awareness of what a very useful tool and very useful framework they are. So yeah, we as I said, we're just developing this, and we're going to do a series of social media graphics about it as well. I mean, there's so much wonderful information, so many wonderful resources, but we want to make them South African to try and get, try and help spread the message that these SDGs do have.
When you mentioned that there is not sufficient awareness from your perspective, are you talking about generally in South Africa, or is it specific for the fashion industry?
Both. I think both. I don't know, Cyril, what do you think? But I don't think we don't use the language. We don't use the language in general to.
So it's not a household name yet.
I don't think so. I might be wrong, but I don't think so.
Cyril, what do you think?
Lucy, I think maybe a shift would be to think that maybe as SGDs, or the 17 SGDs, isn't a household name, but the 17 categories, we do talk about them. Let's look at 1 and 2. No poverty, zero hunger. That is a major issue for Africa, the continent of Africa. So we address them in different scenarios, but we don't sort of constantly refer to them as the SDG 17 goals that need to be accomplished by 2030. So I agree with what Jackie is saying in part on that. But I think, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, responsible consumption and production, climate action, These are all fundamental parts of fashion revolution. We talk about them, and when we talk about them, we bring them into the SDGs. We talk about them in that frame of reference, because there's something credible about saying United Nations, UN, 17 SDGs. There's a credibility about that. But, you know, I think, again, to go back to just your intro, when you spoke about doing the right thing, you know, I think just as if we take away titles and we take away everything, we are fundamentally human, and we've got to do the right thing. We've got to care for the environment. We've got to care for people. We've got to care for community. You know, and in South Africa, specifically talking about locally here at home, we've got to care about no poverty. We've got to care about zero hunger to alleviate that. And in the work that we do, how do we add quality to that, to those top two goals, for instance? So I think, you know, in terms of, if we had to talk about the branding and marketing of the SDGs, I do think we as corporate South Africa, as corporate global, we have a lot of responsibility there to kind of constantly be referring back to it, to be talking about it, to say that by 2030 we need to be compliant. We have to target these things. But I think if you break it down in different silos, people are addressing these things differently. You know, so that's just where I would come from in terms of how I understand it at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Jackie, you, I think you understand the power of storytelling, right? How important it is to not just share the statistics, but present it in a way that people understand and make people care, right? That's the art of engagement. How do you think what do you think we should do better? How can you help us? Like, what should we do to tell the story better of the SDGs, right? And what needs to be done to really get the traction? And as Cyril mentioned, yes, people understand these are the issues, like the elementary. We are all humans. We have children. We want the best for our children and for the future of the planet. Make sure that we have or they have the planet worth living on, right? This is just very elementary view of the situation. But what do we need to do to get the right traction, both from the industry, from the retailers, from the producers, right, from designers, and also on the other side, how do we engage the customers, like the consumers that can really put the pressure and really trigger the chain reaction on the production side? So what do we need to do? Is it about education? Is it about price incentives? Is it about the campaign? What do you think would work?
I just want to first say, I think Cyril's completely right. I think even though we don't use the SDG language, I think that the issues are very relevant in South Africa. I mean, inequality, poverty, hunger. So those concerns are, you know, it's what our government talks about. It's what the newspapers cover. I mean, and corruption, obviously, in South Africa is a big issue because it's slowing the process of trying to solve those issues. So those are all conversations that I had all the time. But the framework of the SDGs, I mean, I only really became very familiar with them through my studies, which I did at the Sustainability Institute a few years ago. But I think that maybe, does it need to be labeled as an SDG for it not to be, you know, taken seriously, for it to be taken seriously? I don't know. But I think if we want to promote the SDGs as a framework, I think, you know, there's some wonderful tools that I have found on your on the UN's website. And I kind of think, I wonder why I haven't seen that before, or why were those not promoted to us or through Fashion Revolution or through Twig, so that we could have also shared that. I mean, some of them are quite old already. So I don't know whether it's a communications or whether South Africa just isn't a priority in the messaging, but yeah, I mean, I think the stories that are coming out and used through, you know, the graphics and the fun things that are done are sufficient. It's just not necessarily reaching us. So, or reaching me, because I mean maybe Cyril has a different experience, but I don't often see the SDGs used in communications or stories in South Africa?
Yeah, so that's a great point right there, right? We need to perhaps work more with the media organizations, with the journalists to really help us tell story. And of course, it's not about the goals. It's about the issues, right? The goals are here to provide a blueprint, the framework, the market space where everybody can gather and like learn together. Like, what is it that we can be done? Figure out how we can help each other, join resources, and really scale it up, right? And what I have heard from my various consultations across the sector, in various countries and communities, is that people appreciate the goals because it visualizes, it provides kind of the tangible categories of all these challenges and gives it a framework for, there's a deadline. We know how to measure them, we know who they are, and it kind of provides unifying space where it's like a cross section where we can all come together and say, like, which way do we need to go? And let's walk together, as Cyril mentioned, because these big issues like poverty, inequality, discrimination, they have been here for centuries, right? These are not fresh issues. And there have been attempts how to address it, but we cannot keep on doing the same thing, hoping that we will find a solution, right? Like it doesn't happen. We have to think very differently on a different scale. We really have to catalyze an action on much different level to really achieve an impact. And okay, so next question. I'm going to go to Cyril, if I may. So Cyril, you already mentioned a few things about the fashion revolution, right? So the fashion revolution is about fostering the belief that change is possible. And what you do is you celebrate those that are on a journey to create more ethical and sustainable future for all. Can you tell us a little bit of, what is happening with fashion revolution? What's on your calendar for the future, for the next coming months, and what you would like to share with this crowd?
Sure. So firstly, I think it's important to note that while I head up South Africa, I don't do this alone. I do it with an incredible team. Jackie is also part of that team, and we work with Twig quite often. And we also, so just to go back in terms of Fashion Revolution's vision and mandate, and the powerful hashtag "Who Made My Clothes." We were fortunate enough 2 years ago to be in London, to be in Manchester with the Fashion Revolution community, global community, talking about our countries, talking about the importance of the global work of the fashion activism of Fashion Revolution. And while sitting there, I kind of thought, why is it that the traction in South Africa isn't where I personally wanted to be, on much more information and a lot of people responding to it. And it occurred to me that we have 11 official languages in South Africa. And that just tells you that you cannot just take a campaign message in English and expect it to be understood and be fluent in South Africa. And so it started to sort of think about it on a more sort of transactional level. How do we break this down, and realize that we had to take the hashtag "Who Made My Clothes" and "I Made Your Clothes" and translate that into 11 official languages. I spoke to Jackie. I also spoke to the Cape Town Fashion Council, and Kerry at the council pointed out that apart from the 11, we also have a 12th, which was sign language. What about people that are deaf? So we started talking about this between Twig and the council, and we got the hashtags translated into the 11 official languages, which Twig was very instrumental in getting that done. And the council assisted, the Fashion Council assisted in terms of putting a beautiful video together with different nationalities, different cultures, asking a simple question. And the response to that was phenomenal, because basically what happened was people started relating to their mother tongue. And that is important, because when you speak in the vernacular, you then sort of get a different audience, and people start paying attention to what you're saying. So to come back to the question, what do we have to do? We have a lot of work ahead of us. We have basically everything that happens at Fashion Revolution Global. We've got to interpret that on a local community basis? How do we take that information, distill it down for local communities, and how do we speak it in the vernacular, in the language that local communities can understand, can relate to, and how does it affect their community? So it's kind of like taking a conscious campaign and making it even more conscious in your local community. So we have a lot to do. And I'm going to sort of piggyback off the previous question about partnerships and kind of say that this is a classic example, in terms of the partnerships that we have with different organizations, that while we take our lead from the global organization of Fashion Revolution, we have to then partner with local communities, local organizations on the ground in South Africa in order for the campaign to have traction. And, at the end of the day, again, coming back to the 17 SDGs, and I can almost pinpoint for every SDG, Fashion Revolution, it touches on something in Fashion Revolution, and which is exciting. And we talk about it a lot in Fashion Revolution, global and local, in terms of the UN SDGs. And it is important for us to take those goals and to break it down into the fashion industry, into the creative industry, and kind of figure out, okay, if we talk about climate change in this country, how do we do that? If we talk about good health and well-being, how do we do that in the fashion sector? And we can only do that with the right partners, with the right messaging, and in the right vernacular. So we've got a lot of work. I can't pinpoint one thing, but Jackie can probably elaborate a little bit about Fashion Open Studio that's happening later in the year. We've got some exciting things that are coming up, some exciting collaborations. But I think just to answer that question, a lot of work ahead of us, and it has to be in local languages. Again, 11 official languages, 12 being sign language. So we've got our work cut out for us.
Yeah, phenomenal example. Have you worked with any academic institution on translation of these languages? How did you do that?
Jackie, should I hand that over to you?
Jackie, tell us, please. Yeah, on mute. Yes.
Yeah, it was a very interesting process because we actually reached out to a lot of different organizations and a lot of different people, and then obviously we had to make sure everything was correct. So in terms of academic institutions, we went to one, but we also double checked, we did a lot of translation here, and then we double checked with people who are living in the areas where that vernacular is well spoken. And then we also had to be careful about what was, High Zulu and more commonly spoken language. It was quite an intense process. But we got there.
That's excellent. What a great example. And you have mentioned something so important that I have not emphasized yet, and it's translating the goals, right? All these issues into local context, the local level. Like, why should people care about this? Well, this is about the clean water, right? And clearly, clean water means access to clean. It means health in the communities, and the health provision of nutritious meals for children means that they will learn better in schools, and eventually they will have better access to livelihoods. And all these issues are so interconnected. But if you have to step it down, you have to kind of unpack it from this big, beautiful, ambitious agendas to what does it mean for you, for your specific family, for your specific business. Anyway, Cyril mentioned, he already hinted that we have something exciting coming up, Fashion Open Studio. Are you ready to talk about it, Jackie?
Yeah, and then just before I do that, is it me you're talking to?
Yes.
Yeah, so I just about an hour ago, I received a email from somebody trying to petition for money. And for 5 years, he has not had access to water, no running water. And this is in South Africa. But I'm just looking at this. There's no mention of an SDG in here. So there's no mention of an SDG. There's no mention. Yeah, it's just no water for 5 years. We haven't had water to flush our toilets. We haven't had water to drink from a tap. So that's very interesting. It's just an example of that not being in our language, the use of our how we frame things here. But yeah, the Fashion Open Studio is a project that the Fashion Revolution runs. I don't know how you talk about it. Is it a project, or is it the daughter of Fashion Revolution? But it's this wonderful platform run by Fashion Revolution, which is showcasing designers around the world who are using sustainable practices. And a lot of it is kind of indigenous knowledge and indigenous practices. And in South Africa, we are doing one next week where we are partnering with Sindiso Khumalo, who's going to be opening up her studio with a live stream where she's showcasing how women embroider and mend and fix clothes. And she works with these amazing women who are so highly skilled at the mending and embroidery. It's just beautiful to see. I was actually there the other day. But yeah, so that will be open for the whole world to see, which is just beautiful. And she's upskilling women, and she's providing employment, very dignified employment, which is, those are great goals to be meeting.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Jackie, let me stay with you. You have launched so-called Twig Sustainability Award, right? And can you tell us more about it? What is it? Why have you decided to launch it?
So I felt that, so that was three years ago we launched. I felt very strongly that they would provide a platform where we could firstly showcase designers using sustainability practices, a bit like the Fashion Open Studio, but also to use it as a platform to talk about sustainability. And there are fashion awards, which means we're focusing on fashion, but as you know, fashion is the most amazing medium of communication. Yeah. So for me, fashion really is a way for us to talk to the world and talk to our community and showcase South African fashion to the world, and then also to use it as a platform to promote practices and fibers and share knowledge about sustainability to our community as well. So it's a two-way thing. We are showcasing designers to the world, and we're also sharing information, and so we're sharing knowledge to our designers as well, and just to facilitate their design practices in studios. So yeah, and it's grown. We are in our third year now. We've just closed nominations for the third awards, and we have had a 21% increase in nominations. And we also partnered with an organization that helped us this year for the first time, helped us frame the nomination form to make it a much more rigorous process. And it has made a huge difference to the entry forms. So designers and brands put a lot of effort into their entries and really thought about it. And I've got such amazing feedback already from people saying, it took us a long time. And even if we don't win, or even if we're not listed as finalists, this has been a really, really important process for us to go through, because it's made us rethink and think about our practice. And that really, for me, is what this is all about. People thinking about what they do and learning new things in the process. So it's not only about winning, it's about education. And what we did this year that was new is we also introduced categories to reach different parts of the supply chain and the value chain. So we've got textile makers and mills, we've got retail, and we've also got CMT and manufacturers, just to kind of make sure that we are touching on all the supply, all people in the supply chain.
Yeah. And
what we also, we haven't mentioned it yet, but South Africa has a clothing and retail, clothing and leather and footwear, let me get the whole name properly, basically a clothing and textiles master plan, which is being run by the government and trying to grow the industry, really to address the unemployment we have in the country. But at the same time, there is a drive to green the economy. But I think for both Twig and for Fashion Revolution, we need to just make sure that the greening of this is happening at the same time as the growing of the industry, because a lot of it is also, we could just fall into doing fast fashion without being responsible about it. But from what I've gathered, it's so far, it's being done in tandem with the just transition goals of government as well. So it's very exciting to see what our government is doing, and you know, and how we want to showcase it and celebrate the success of this master plan and of all our industry players at the same time.
Oh, you have touched upon so many important things. And first of all, congratulations on the third year, right, of the award. Important platform to have. And I have to say that there's so much going on. Like a lot of people are innovative about doing business, really conscious, and there is so much creativity within the sector and beyond on how to translate the vision of sustainability and better future, and kind of integrate it in the core business model. Make sure that there is kind of cohabitation between the businesses, the business nature of the small business and also large businesses, but really with strong social and environmental components. And what I find very important is that we highlight the stories. So we provide a space for those that are really leading the change, recognize them, and enable them to connect with others, right? Create this possibility for recognizing the great work of those that are driving the action and change, and really inspire others to follow suit and trigger collaboration. And that's what I feel the awards that the Twig Sustainability Awards is doing. And it's very similar in its way, in the mission, to what the Conscious Fashion and Lifestyle Network is doing. You know, it's a network that we have launched here at the UN in collaboration with Conscious Fashion Campaign. And it's basically a space where you can register. It's a platform that everybody across the world of fashion, textile industry, lifestyle industry can tell the story. What are you doing on sustainability? What are you doing on all these goals, right? From any angle, you know, from the labor standards, gender equality, inequalities in the larger sense, to responsible consumption, production, and climate. And just by inviting people in, it's very open and transparent, telling the story, it will help to create a community, to really understand who is doing what is happening where, how can I collaborate across, you know, within my sector or across geographies, and really recognize those that are leading. And with that, I would like to go to Cyril. Cyril, you have, and Jackie already hinted on that, on the issue of slow versus fast fashion. Well, as part of the All Fashion Sources Cape Town, the Young Designer Competition, now it's in a fourth year, you were asked to develop the brief, how to build the concept of the slow fashion, right? With the emphasis on craftsmanship and quality and functionality and all that. So why is this important? And can you tell us a little bit more about this concept?
For sure. So Lucy, I think this is a bit of a personal story, because I studied fashion design, and when I studied, we didn't really talk much about sustainability. It wasn't a part of our curriculum. In fact, it actually didn't exist at all, to be very honest. And this is obviously going back over 2 decades ago. But I think as somebody now who's informed, somebody who's working in this space, I have a responsibility to the next generation. I feel it personally, apart from the organizations I'm linked to. But as an individual, I feel that I do have a responsibility to encourage the future generation of designers to adopt sustainable plans in terms of how do we design, how do we run a sustainable business. So that's the reason why when Neil spoke to me about the brief and spoke to me about the competition, this is where it was coming from. It came from a point of, okay, if I was a designer and I was entering this, what would I want to see? And you know, you cannot ignore sustainability. It's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. We have to do it because it is fundamental in terms of the planet, in terms of people. So really, this was a brief done to encourage the next generation of designers to think differently, to think, how would we design? How would we run a better business? How would we adopt slow fashion? How would we sort of nurture quality craftsmanship? Basically with the end goal of a sustainable fashion future. So that's where that came from.
Can you can you tell us, like, you mentioned a few things, right? It's like there has been really insufficient incorporation of sustainability curricula in design and fashion schools and maybe business schools. Do you think this has changed? Is the reality now different between, you know, do the current students of fashion design, and they are eager to become the designers and make it in the fashion industry? Do they have an ability to they have opportunity to really learn about sustainability within the schools in South Africa that are they offering any better sustainability program?
Well, I have to confidently say yes, because we had an opportunity of looking at the entries that were coming in and prejudging and reading. They had to submit a 300-word sort of essay in terms of why they chose to follow this route, or why they had to motivate their design. And reading that, it was very clear that the designers understood sustainability. They understood every core of it. And that really makes me excited, because it tells me that they're learning that at campus. And if they're not learning at campus, they're actually being self-taught. You know, they're informed, they're educated, they're reading. And I think, you know, again, to pivot from the year that I was studying fashion to a student today, you have social media, you have media at large. So, you know, when you talk about greenwashing, students are aware about that. They're aware about brands using sustainability just as a marketing tool, or in their classrooms, they're learning about better ways, you know, to upskill, to use, you know, recycled fabric. And I think, again, it's important to understand in terms of geography where we sit, you know, and Africa, we have our issues as a continent. And in South Africa, we certainly have political issues like most countries in the world, but we also have other economic challenges. You know, one of the things is we have power cuts and load shedding. So if you're a designer, how do you design? How do you think differently? And I think it was very refreshing to read what students were writing and to look at how they were using fabrics and how they were. So I think, yes, to answer the question, curriculum has shifted in a positive direction. And I think also the students are certainly much more informed. And I'm extremely hopeful for the next generation of design. And I think, you know, you certainly just have to look at the fashion awards, and you can see Sindisa Khumalo, Teba Magugu, Lukhanya Mindingi, you know, that are raising the South African flag extremely high for us. And they are doing it in a way that is sustainable, in a way that has good business practices for a sustainable future. And they care about the SDGs as well. You know, so what they do touches on various elements of the 17 goals. So I do think, yeah, you know, we're in a good space at the moment.
Fantastic. I mean, it's an encouraging message to hear from you, and it's so good that within relatively short time, there has been such a shift, right? That you didn't really have that opportunity to learn about these issues at school. You know, I assume that you have been you just learned by doing it and being self-taught, and now you have the next generation of designers and you know, fashion professionals that are taught in an academic setting about these issues and really had an opportunity to learn at it at school. Well, what would be your message? Now I'm looking to kind of wrap up this this conversation. What would be your message to the future or upcoming designers and those that are interested in fashion industry career? What do you want to tell them?
Oh, what I would like to tell them, I love that. It's such a big question, but I have to bring it a little bit to relevance of what I'm involved in. And I have to speak about Plain Tiger, which is an e-commerce platform which is focusing on conscious luxury fashion. And, they have sort of 5 conscious criterias. And, they approached me about running an accelerator. And, they, on their website, they talk about cruelty-free, ethically made, fair trade, made with sustainable materials, slow made. And one can almost look at, okay, e-commerce, do we need another e-commerce platform? But 100% if it is following sustainable business practices. And so much so that Fashion Revolution and Plain Tiger are going to partner together on this accelerator that we're doing going forward, to different countries. And I think what I would say to young designers is look out for things like accelerator programs, look out for things like Fashion Revolution, look out for organizations like Twig, look out for organizations like the United Nations SDGs, and kind of, don't sort of be narrow vision and tunnel vision, be broader and think broader. And when you are sort of designing and when you're going out into the workplace, keep an eye out in terms of your localization, where you are as a designer, your city, your country. Design with your country in mind, design for the climate, and design with the community in mind, because you can foster relationships in the community to get things done. We've learned what the pandemic has done. We've learned, excuse me, what lockdown has done, where it's literally brought industries to a standstill. And we've realized the importance of local communities, the importance of localization. And I think that's what I would say to designers. Keep your eyes open, read, and follow companies that are doing things the right way. And I think, we're living in a very interesting time. I think there's been a massive shift. And I think people have taken out the fluff. That's kind of what I call it. They've taken out the fluff and they've really gone to the heartbeat of what's really important. And again, to reiterate your opening, it's about doing things the right way. People often say to me, what does sustainability mean to me? And, I've often said this to Jackie and Lucy, I'll say it to you as well. At the end of the day, it's doing the right thing for people, for planet, and as you correctly pointed out, community as well. So that's what I would say to young designers. If you can design with touching on those points, you're heading in the right direction.
So be genuine, be authentic, and follow the heartbeat of what is important.
100%.
Amazingly said. And thank you, Cyril. I much appreciate you sharing these thoughts with us. And now we go to Jackie, the same question. What is the message to, what is your message, advice, right? How would you like to encourage the generation, the up and coming designers, writers, influencers, those who care and want to make an impact on the world? What would you suggest them to do? You are on mute, Jackie.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I just think that the future of fashion is so exciting and it's so meaningful. And it's not only about making clothes, which I think is so interesting. It's about growing fibers. It's about weaving. It's about making. It's about mending. It's about recycling. It's almost like the traditional idea of fashion has just collapsed and opened up a whole new world of really exciting innovation and also just meaningful connections with people and community and with the earth. I just recently saw a story about people in the UK who are growing their own clothes. So it's following the journey of planting the seed, weaving this type, and then wearing those clothes. And it's in communities which have lost all their jobs through globalization of the fashion industry. And I planted some organic cotton seeds in my garden about a week ago for a study that I'm doing on organic cotton. So it was just, suddenly the whole idea of fashion just is so wide open, and the idea of biodesign and biomimicry and, kombucha leather. I think there's a world out there that is so interesting and so exciting for young designers. And it doesn't have to be fast fashion. Because it can't be fast fashion.
No, absolutely. I love what you said. You said that it's, we are looking at the fashion Now, from a more holistic perspective, the new dimension has opened up. It's not a traditional, there's like, the paradigm has shifted, right? And there is a whole new meaning of what does it mean to be fashionable? Like, it's not just what we put on our body, but how it's created, how we communicated about it, what we do with fashion, with the clothes afterwards, right? What is, how we are looking at the whole life cycle of that. And I'm, again, not talking just about the product, but about the whole services and communications, where it's coming from, what is the transportation impact of the clothes, shipment and packaging, the hangers, right? All that. It's part of the fashion story. And
also, sorry, Lucy,
yeah, go ahead.
It's also not, I mean, I've been giving you low-tech examples, but there's also the wonderful high-tech examples of the digital metaverses and the augmented reality that are very exciting too. So it's just a very exciting world of new world. And the idea, the kind of the parallel universes of the low tech and the high tech are just fascinating too. And to be able to straddle those two is, you know, there's an amazing world of learning too. I mean, in education institutions, you know, what do you choose? Do you choose to, you know, craft your own clothes, or do you just tell the students to go straight into a metaverse and develop digital tailoring? It's just fascinating.
Absolutely. And if any influencers and all the media and journalists that, you know, are hopefully watching this, please, you have all the tools. We need your collaboration. We need your voices, right? Help us tell the story of the sustainability, figure out what is it that matters to you and highlight that. We are not asking everybody to do work on all 17 SDGs. Find whatever is most relevant to you and focus on that, right? In any scale is relevant. And with that, I would like to just say many thanks to all of you for joining the conversation. It's been fascinating, at least for me. And I would like to thank the colleagues and friends at the Master Frankfurt and Conscious Fashion Lifestyle Campaign team, and of course to both of you as speakers, Cyril, Anaika, and Jackie May. What a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.